Another developer has publicly went against Epic exclusivity. PEGI have seemingly lost their minds over NBA, Valve are taking on the European Union, and in the $12 million bonus case, Gearbox CEO Randy Pitchford has now been accused of contempt of court. All of that and more in today's episode of The Roundup. Hey everyone, and welcome back to The Roundup, our twice per week gaming news show where we take you through all the important stories. It's a pretty action-packed week. Do note that YouTube is not being kind to independent news, so be sure to help us out with a like and a subscribe. And with that, let's get straight into the news. First off, we've got the PEGI situation. So, PEGI have responded to the NBA 2K20 trailer after a lot of inquiries, and they've said that while the trailer does focus on the game's gambling-like mechanic, that those mechanics don't represent the entire game. And that's basically how they're defending the game's 3+ rating. Now, this is a bit wild because if you look at some of their past ratings where, say, Pokemon's Game Corner and Super Mario 64's Casino both got those games 12+ ratings, leading to, of course, Pokemon dropping the gambling minigame for future entries, it just seems a little bit crazy. In those cases, with Pokemon and Mario, it was mostly just the gambling aesthetics and, the simulated gambling being in the game. That's what was the problem. Those gambling minigames were not a core part of either Mario 64 DS or the Pokemon games, yet they still, were hit on their rating. I think it's abundantly clear that if Pokemon is to be hit by this, then NBA should be as well. That's only fair. PEGI looking at the gambling games as just being a small part of the overall game is also very strange, because once you adjust that game for its revenue, it's easy to argue that my team is going to be the core of NBA 2K20 and that the gambling minigames are pretty much core to the overall reward mechanics of the game. So overall, it's a very disappointing situation, and the right thing is for PEGI to rate that game as 12+. I don't think anything else is acceptable. Next up, we've got another epic story. So the developers of Iron Harvest have generated quite a lot of buzz by not deciding to go with the Epic Games Store, something that partially mirrors the recent situation with Dark. That's another game that has garnered a lot of goodwill by, in their case, kind of coming down on Epic like a ton of bricks. They went very bullish with their, just with saying they wouldn't go with the exclusive. Now, the Iron Harvest situation was actually sparked off as a topic of interest because of their publisher, Deep Silver. Why? Well, Shenmue 3, another Deep Silver published game that was also crowdfunded, is going with the Epic Store. Iron Harvest's developer posted thanking players for their support with the decision not to go with Epic, and they went on to suggest that people wishlist the game on Steam. Now, from a consumer perspective, that seems quite simple, but for those who are in the industry and know who games are actually sold, well, the Steam algorithm is really important here, and wishlists are actually the single most important thing for the algorithm. If you go to Gamescom and you go to the BizDev section, you will find people talking about the Steam algorithm. Much like with YouTube, on Steam you have to play the algorithm, so there is a solid financial reason for them to convert dissatisfaction with Epic into Steam wishlist. That's very important for their exposure. But that said, it is also a move that much of their audience is very happy with. As to why they didn't go with Epic, well, clearly they just did not need what Epic was offering and decided that this was the correct decision, just like with what happened with Dark. Deep Silver clearly did not mandate the Epic exclusive in this case, which could be due to the nature of the deal that they have. Given the differences in scale, maybe Deep Silver's Iron Harvest deal is different to their Shenmue 3 deal, and there's just, different people have different powers there. So overall, this one is a simple PR win for the developers. It's one that, of course, does just stem from them following the wishes of most of their customer base. They're probably only able to do this, though, because of their financial situation. Their Kickstarter was very successful, significantly more than its goal. They have a publisher, they have done past projects before, so it seems like they quite simply just did not need the upfront storefront cash advance. That means they're in a position to decline an Epic offer when there are some other studios that maybe would not be able to, and that's pretty much the simple financials of that matter. But of course, it's good that they're in a position where they don't feel like they need to go with Epic. It's good that they've went against that, and it's good that, they're doing right by their community. So next up, and in the realm of games being a little bit nasty, we've got a Pokemon Gacha game. So Pokemon Masters, a new game by DNA, has launched worldwide recently, and It's pretty rough. The core combat mechanics and the story content seem to be reasonable enough, but that's all wrapped up in a gacha game format where you get trainer and Pokemon combos of varying rarities, with 1 star through 5 star, that kind of system. The standard gacha game thing. Now, this is a highly successful genre in terms of both audience size and average spend per user, with that latter stat actually being significantly higher than in other formats of free-to-play game. Nintendo have done very well from gacha games as well, with Fire Emblem Heroes and Dragalia Lost performing very well for the company, though seemingly not yet on the scale of Fate Grand Order, which is kind of the big daddy of the genre. Now, the tricky thing here is image. Pokemon is a very family-friendly franchise. Seeing it be mixed in with this type of mechanic, yeah, that's quite sad to see, especially since this one is very, it's very rough with its monetization. So you get paid and unpaid gems, but the best characters only come from the gacha pools that cost paid gems, and that does make it, very, very pay to win from the get-go, as pretty much is standard for the genre. Now, the issue that I take here mainly is that this is an IP that does target children. That's a group who will not have the mental toolkit to responsibly deal with such monetization. Now, to their credit, Nintendo are upfront with spending limits, but to me, it's about what value are you as a company willing to provide your customer in return for the money you want from that customer. In the case of this entire genre, being real with you, I find it I just can't see the value that's being provided, and it just feels so darn scummy. Now, one worrying part of this game is that the worldwide release came with a patch that significantly slowed down progression as compared to the soft launch of the game, which again isn't a good look. Previous Nintendo gacha games were at least generous off the bat, but it seems to be less the case here. Clearly they know that the Pokemon IP can generate far, far more money through things like this than it would through mainline game releases. And yeah, sure, Sword and Shield are coming soon. Sure, they'll almost certainly make a lot of money, but I imagine that the likes of Pokemon Go and this will vastly out-earn the main games, or at the very least, they'll be a lot more financially efficient. And then next up, we've got the story of Valve fighting the European Union. This is quite an interesting situation. Basically, Valve and a bunch of publishers are facing antitrust charges in the EU. Now, this stems from regional pricing and geo-locking. So in the EU, internal trade between member states is basically supposed to be a really big free market, with goods and services being easily purchased in any member state with all the same currency and used in any other. That's kind of the ideal. Now, the problem here is that geo-blocking doesn't really work with that. For an example, you could purchase an Eastern European game key, you could then travel to the United Kingdom, or maybe to Ireland, or somewhere else that's in a different pricing tier, and you could be left not being able to play your games. Now, the argument, not the argument in the case, but the whole point from Valve's side here is that geo-locking like this allows them to do regional pricing that is more in line with the purchasing power of a country's citizens. Now, for an example, €1 will get you a lot further in Lithuania than it would in Dublin. A €60 game in Lithuania is going to be a far larger chunk of somebody's disposable income than it would be for somebody in Ireland, especially in a city like Dublin. So this means that by geo-blocking Lithuanian keys outside of that pricing region, they're able to offer games to that audience for less money without compromising the international value of the game. In theory. So this geo-blocking essentially, in the EU's opinion, violates their laws, and that's led to the aforementioned antitrust charges. We don't know how much the fines are right now, but Reuters point out in their exclusive that it can be up to 10% of a company's turnover. Now, for Valve, that is a lot of money, but Reuters also point out that if a company admits they are wrong and settles, they will get a 10% discount in their fine. Now, this is the option that Bandai Namco, Capcom, Focus Home, Koch Media, and ZeniMax have all went for, but not Valve. Valve have decided to fight it. Now, given how much of the violation is facilitated by their platform, I've got to imagine that the EU probably want to go after them really hard, so they clearly have decided they are better off fighting rather than settling, even if settling would mean getting a 10% reduction in their fine. Overall, I think the situation makes sense when you look at all the parties and what's involved, but it does expose much of the funk in the EU economy and the oddities of a single currency that spans vastly different regional economies, which is what's leading to the geo-blocking and the regional pricing and all of that stuff, but also having that be violating the rules of the EU. So ultimately what this means for consumers is that the enforcement of this could result in games being more expensive in countries where purchasing power is, different to, say, the likes of France or Ireland. So It could mean that if you're in Lithuania, you're not going to get regional pricing, you'll have to pay more for your games. However, it would also mean the end of region lock, so if you purchased a game that was in Lithuania, you could travel to Dublin and you'd be able to play it just fine. So that's kind of what's going on there. Now, in fairness, the regional discounts are not that much these days. That seems to be less of a thing, and I mean, there's even secondary impacts of this, like, say, people using G2A and gifting for, trading keys and getting around regional pricing and making a quick buck and just all of that stuff that potentially is put at risk by, by the outcome of this situation. But for now, we're just going to have to wait and see how the actual case goes because, well, it's not actually happened yet. All we know is that Valve are refusing to settle and will be fighting this one. Okay, next up, we've got an update from the wild, wild world of Randy Pitchford. So, covering the background of this story, that would take 10-20 minutes. I've done it before, so I'm going to make this one super quick. There is an ongoing legal battle between Gearbox and Wade Collender, and he is a man who used to serve as their legal counsel. Now, it was a very bitter falling out. There's all sorts of wild allegations, and it's pretty much right now a two-way character assassination between the two cases. But it seems like Randy did indeed divert bonus funds to his own company, and that's one of the main things that really grabbed headlines with this story. Still, though, the case is, it's all in progress, and today, well, that's what we're going to be talking about. So Wade Collender's legal team have moved to accuse their opponents of contempt of court. Now, the core of this is that supposedly Gearbox are not handing over documents in the discovery phase of the case. Now, discovery is the stage of proceedings where both sides are able to gather data, information files, things like that, and basically, you're legally compelled to hand over relevant documents if you're asked. Now, apparently Gearbox have not been doing that, or they've just not been forthright. They've been slow, they've been dragging their feet, something along those lines. Can we read much into this? Well, honestly, not a lot right now until we get another update in the case. All we know is that one side is accusing the other side of something that is fairly serious. Contempt of court is quite a serious thing. If I were to speculate, they're probably trying to build a case, Gearbox and Co., that Randy, they're not trustworthy and they're not complying because they've got something to hide. That's what I would imagine is going on there, but right now I can't really draw any firm conclusions. And of course, more updates on this one as we get them. Then next, a quick story that I missed because I was doing Gamescom preparation. Ubisoft have taken fire for further monetizing Rainbow Six Siege. Now, Siege is a very big game, a very successful one for Ubisoft, both critically and financially, so it's no surprise that they want to double down on that success and earn more from it. Now, this time they're adding a battle pass, with the battle passes being on top of the game's existing season passes. Now, combined with the game's other forms of monetization, a sizable portion of the fanbase is displeased. So right now, the way that things work is that past purchasing the base game, the only gameplay that's unlocked via monetization is the season pass stuff, because that unlocks new operators. Now, I think that bit of it is totally fair, given this game's ongoing development, its constant updates, new characters. I think that stuff's really great, and I think most people agree that that's a totally reasonable way to monetize the game. Now, in this case, I actually think it's less the battle pass's existence, and it's more that it's another layer of monetization. That's something that I think audiences are increasingly tired of and skeptical of. Now, as for my take, well, I think that Siege is a paid game, but it's also true that it's constantly updated. There's no problem, in my view, with them monetizing the game post-launch. It's just right now they have bad optics because of the density of the monetization. If they said that maybe the season passes would come with a battle pass included, then people wouldn't have mind, and that would just be an additional thing to, get people to buy a season pass. That would be fair. I think right now the problem is having too many overlapping things. That's something that Ubisoft really, basically, they're asking their more dedicated players to double dip, having both the season pass and the battle pass, and basically that ask is just leaving a sour taste in the mouth of much of their audience. And really, that's the thing. In principle, doing a battle pass is fine. Doing your season passes, it's fine. It's just the way that they're overlapping that's not really ideal. I think that the more a game does things like this, the more it should probably be a free-to-play game. I think this would have went over better with people if they just said, hey everyone, the base game is now free. But they didn't do that. Then finally, we've got a quick fire story that I wanted to cover. Blizzard have sued a Chinese game company over copyright infringement. In this case, it's one where Blizzard are clearly in the right, and in response, the event and game has been shut down. Not that it's going to stop a lot of Chinese companies piggybacking either off Blizzard's aesthetics, their game designs, or just their character designs, because it's quite ridiculous. I mean, how many times have you seen a Facebook ad where it just looks like it's a Warcraft character or a Hearthstone character, and yeah, it's just some random random game. So I thought that was an interesting little story. It's always interesting seeing those things actually go through and those games actually being shut down, because a lot of the time that just IP violation just kind of happens and there's not much that people do about it. So certainly an interesting one. But there you go, that is it for today's episode of the Roundup. If you're interested in Warcraft Classic, be sure to check out the video we put up yesterday. It's just more of a meta-analysis of what Warcraft Classic could mean for the industry and really just why it's doing so well and what makes it different from a lot of modern games. I think a lot of people enjoyed that one. So yeah, be sure to check that out. Like, subscribe, all that good stuff. And with that, thank you very much for watching this video, and I will see you next time.